Good evening, everybody. How is everyone doing this evening? Hope all is well. My name is Sylvia, and this is the infamous Sylvia channel. This is where you will find reenactment of the court cases. Right now, we're doing reenactment of exactly what happened at Robert Sylvester Kelly's trial. A lot of us have that was there know that what exactly happened, and we want to show the world exactly what occurred, not the fake news that's been going on in the main media. We want to show you how Mr. Kelly was railroaded, how witnesses lied on the witness stand, how information that was provided in showing that Mr. Kelly was innocent and he was not just railroaded. They set an entrapment for Mr. Kelly. And yesterday, you heard Jane Doe tell him that she was 18. You heard that her mother was texting Mr. Kelly and telling him that that she was 18. And you also heard a police officer come into the hotel and stating that, he looked at the ID and the ID showed that she was 18, as well as Mr. Kelly asking her when the police came knocking at the door, ask her, "How old are you?" And she said, "Are you 18?" And she said, "Yes, I am 18." So she said it several times that she was 18. And if a court, a police officer couldn't figure out whether or not she was not 18, how in the world you expect a man like Mr. Kelly to know when a police officer who is trained to recognize IDs and trained, if someone's saying that someone's underage, that would be the first thing that they would check, right? But according to the officer, he gave Mr. Kelly his card whenever he needs security. Come and see him. Not only did he do that, there was a phone call made to the parents, and the parents verified that she was 18. All right, so now we're going to continue part two. And part two, you'll hear much more. And this is the direct examination. You'll hear much more when we do the cross examination. That's what we're hoping to get to tonight, if it's possible. We're not going to keep you long, but here, let's begin. Without further ado, here's part two of the Jane Doe number 5's testimony. We have our prosecutor, Miss Geddes. Hello, Miss Geddes.
Good evening.
We have Judge Ann Donnelly.
Hello.
And we have Jane Doe. And I'm waiting for my hold on, Canic. And here we go. Canic. Hello, Canic.
Hello, everyone.
All right, everybody. And let's roll them.
Wait. I'm sorry, I'm still scrolling to get to our page.
Please, page 832, everyone.
I remember that he was staying at the Omni.
Is that a hotel?
Yes.
What happened when you went to the Omni? Did you then
Okay,
go to
one
the
one
Omni?
second, 1 second. There is a noise in the background. Jane, can you put both of your headphones to your ear?
It is, ma'am.
Thank you. All right, sorry, Miss Geddes.
What happened when you went to the Omni? Did you then go to the Omni?
Sorry, Miss Geddes. It's your phone this time. Guys, we're sorry. We're just trying to get this technical difficulty together here. Are you okay now, Miss Geddes? Our apologies. We should have did some sound check before we started, but we're not pros, we're amateurs, but we're just trying to get the information out to you.
I can read Getty's until she's back.
She's here. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
You ready?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I'll start with line 4. What happened when you went to the Omni? Did you then go to the Omni? Jane?
I'm sorry, my mic was off. We did.
What happened there?
We got there after his show had ended, and I believe all the hotels were booked up at the time, and we did see the defendant.
And what, if any, communication did you have with the defendant's assistant that day?
She had expressed to us that all the hotels were booked, and so she was going to give me and my mother her hotel room and book at a further location.
I am showing the witness what's been marked for identification as 233N. Do you recognize 233N?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
It is a text message between me and Cheryl, his assistant.
And what are the dates? What is the date of this communication, this conversation?
May the 8th, 2015.
The government offers 233N. Can it? Can it?
No objection.
Okay, in evidence.
Did you, in fact, get a hotel room that night in Jacksonville?
We did, yes.
How many hotel rooms did you and your mom get?
I told his assistant that me and my mother only needed one room.
How did the defendant's assistant respond?
She responded by saying that she would get us multiple rooms.
And where did you end up staying that night?
I ended up staying in the defendant's hotel room.
Do you recall what, if anything, happened between you and the defendant that evening?
Yes, we were intimate.
And by intimate, what do you mean?
We had vaginal penetration.
You testified earlier about a trip to Los Angeles, Stockton, California, and Las Vegas. Did you travel again to see the defendant after that trip?
I believe so, yes.
How would you get to those locations?
His assistant would book the entire itinerary.
And what type of travel was it?
Flight.
Who did you understand ultimately was paying for their travel?
The defendant.
Now, do you remember all of the dates and locations that you traveled to meet the defendant in spring of 2015?
I do not know.
All right. I want to direct your attention to May 15, 2015. Do you recall where you traveled in or around that day?
No.
I am showing the witness what's been marked for identification as 233S. What is 233S? Do you recognize that?
It is a conversation between me and Cheryl, his assistant.
And what is the date of that conversation?
May the 15th.
The government offers 233S.
Any objection?
None.
Okay, that's in evidence.
Where were you? Where were you arranging to, or where were you hoping to go on or around May 15, 2015?
Yeah, he had told me to tell her to get me to Atlanta.
And by he, who are you referring to?
The defendant.
And can you read the top text message?
Mr. Kelly said to get me to Atlanta, Georgia on Monday.
And then I want to direct your attention to May 21st of 2015. Do you recall where, if any, you traveled in or around that day?
I do not.
I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 233T. Do you recognize what's shown in 233T?
I do.
Generally speaking, what are those? What is it?
It is a text conversation between me and his assistant, Cheryl.
And what is the date of that text communication?
May the 20th, 2015.
And what are you and Cheryl discussing in those text messages?
That he had wanted me to get to San Diego.
And by he, who are you referring to?
Can you just read for oh shit.
10.
The defendant, I'm sorry.
The government offers 233T. Can it? No
No
objection.
objection.
That's in evidence.
Can you just read for the jury that top text message?
Mr. Kelly said to get me to San Diego tomorrow morning.
And who wrote that text message?
I sent that text message.
To Cheryl Mack?
I did, yes.
Did Cheryl Mack then arrange travel for you to get to San Diego?
Yes.
What, if any, sexual contact did you have with the defendant during that trip to California?
We had vaginal penetration.
During that trip in California, what, if any, contraception did the defendant use?
None.
And prior to you having sexual contact with the defendant, what, if anything, did he tell you about any sexually transmitted diseases that he had?
He never expressed anything of that nature.
You testified earlier that you were finishing or you were in your junior year of high school when you took those trips.
Yes.
When the school year ended, what, if anything, did you do for the summer?
I was in Chicago with the defendant
And at the time, where was the defendant living?
in Chicago.
Now, you testified earlier about a telephone number that you got for the defendant on April 18th, 2015. Was that the only telephone of his that you communicated with?
No, he had multiple phone numbers.
Do you recall the other telephone numbers that the defendant had?
I do not know them by heart, no.
Do you know how many other telephones the defendant had?
Yes, he had four numbers, and initially he said that I would receive all of them when I earned his trust.
Did you eventually receive those telephone numbers?
I did, yes.
You said that you were with the defendant in Chicago. Where would you stay in Chicago that summer?
In 2015, I would stay in hotels and I would stay at the studio on Ohio Street.
Do you remember which hotels you stayed in?
I stayed in, majority of them were downtown, the Intercontinental, the W.
In downtown Chicago?
Yes.
You also mentioned that you stayed at the studio. What type of
Okay,
studio was
I'm
it?
so sorry, ladies, but it is really bad. The sound really is bad between you two of you guys. I don't know what it is.
I have both of my ears in.
Okay.
I was muted and I still hear the static, so I'm not sure.
There's a lot of static coming from yours.
I hear it as well.
Go ahead, Gettys, and speak again.
Um,
Yeah, it's really scratchy. Is your phone going dead or
you
I
hear it
don't
on
know what
my
it is.
end?
Yes, on your end.
No, my phone is charged.
Do you have on a headphone?
No, a speakerphone.
I don't know. Must be some. Is there something rubbing on your speakerphone?
No.
I don't know what it is, but it's really
You
bad.
sure it's me?
Yeah. She said hit set the setting. Hit the setting. Hit the
Okay.
setting. Go to audio,
Okay.
and then click echo.
It's already checked.
Take it out. Let's see.
Is
Say
that better?
something.
I still hear the static.
Yeah.
Is everybody else muted?
Yeah. Everybody's muted except me. Let me mute.
Okay, so do you still hear the static now?
It's not that bad anymore. Go ahead.
So it may
It
be
sounds like
you.
something. Sound like something is touching.
Maybe it's you if you didn't hear it when you muted yourself.
No, I hear it.
You hear it now?
Now it sounds like you were moving and something's rubbing against the phone.
Oh no. Let's take out the case.
Is there a case on the phone?
I took the case off.
Go ahead, talk now.
Hello?
Sounds better. Thank you.
It's better.
I still hear it, but okay.
Do you have any kind? Do you have any kind of app that's on behind it? Turn off all the other apps.
Let me see.
Shut everything down except the StreamYard.
Okay. Okay. Do you still hear the static?
Absolutely not. Good job.
Okay. So what line were we on? Let me see.
18, I believe.
18.
Wait, 17 maybe.
Okay, so you also mentioned that you stayed in the studio. What type of studio was that?
It was a business, and in the studio, he had one room that had a master bedroom in it.
And where was the studio located?
It was located in a business office on top of the floor.
Do you recall the street that it was on? You may have already said.
Ohio Street.
Mm.
And was that in downtown Chicago?
It was, yes.
Was there a bathroom inside the defendant's studio on Ohio Street?
There was not.
If you wanted to use the bathroom, where would you go?
I would have to get in touch with him before I could go to the one that was for the public.
And where was that located?
It was outside of his studio on the sixth floor.
Now, was the defendant's studio also on the sixth floor?
It was, yes.
I'm showing the witness what's been marked for identification as 505C and 505B, as in boy. Do you recognize 505C?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This is the business office in which he had a studio on and one of the business suites.
And I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as 505B, as in boy. Do you recognize that?
Yes, that is the main entrance.
The government offers 505B and C.
Government
No
exhibit five.
objection.
I'm sorry.
That's in
Gov-
evidence.
Government's exhibit 505B and 505C were received in evidence.
And I am showing 505C. Do you
Exhibit
recall you said that the defendant was on the sixth floor? Is that which floor is that in the building?
So, just on the sixth floor, when you go upstairs, his unit was to the right. It was the first right that you make.
And was that the top floor?
Yes, it was.
Now, when you started spending time in the studio on Ohio Street, what, if anything, what, if any, rules did you learn that the defendant wanted you to follow while you were in that studio?
I could not leave a room without calling him or an assistant and asking.
And how did you learn that rule?
He had told me not to leave the room without calling him or getting in touch with his assistant.
And I asked you earlier about where the bathroom was located.
Yes.
What if, were you always able to get in touch with the defendant when you needed to use the bathroom?
No.
What would you do if you weren't able to get in contact with the defendant?
I had to urinate in a cup.
Where were the cups?
They would get cups like extra large cups from the gas station, and in the master bedroom, there were tissue paper and baby wipes.
Now, other than in Chicago, where did you regularly see the defendant during those summer months after your junior year?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. During the summer after your junior year, you testified that you would see the defendant in Chicago.
Hmm.
Were there any other cities you regularly saw the defendant that summer?
Atlanta.
And where in Atlanta would you see the defendant?
I would see him in hotels, and he had expressed to me that he had a home in Atlanta, Georgia.
Did you go to that home in Atlanta, Georgia?
I did, yes.
I'm showing the witness what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 506. Do you recognize 506?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This is the big house in Atlanta.
And when you say the big house, what are you referring to?
That's just that's just what the defendant called it.
Is that the defendant's home that you just mentioned?
Yes, it is.
The government offers 506.
No objection.
That's in evidence.
And I'm showing you 504. May we publish 506? I'm sorry, I did it too quickly.
Yes.
And I'm now showing what has been marked for identification as 504. Do you recognize government exhibit 504?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This is the guest house.
And what is the guest house?
At the time, this is where the other woman whom he were in a relationship with lived.
All right. Where is the guest house located? What city?
It's also in Atlanta, Georgia. It's about 15 minutes from the big house.
And have you been to the guest house?
I have, yes.
The government offers 504.
Any objection?
No objection.
That's in evidence. You can publish.
Now, when you visited the defendant in Atlanta over the summer of in 2015, where do you remember staying?
I would stay at hotels, I would stay at the big house, and I would stay at the guest house.
All right. Are those the big house and the guest house are the two houses that were just shown?
Yes,
Initially, when the defendant was on tour and you were traveling with him, how would you travel?
by flight.
And would you attend each of the defendant's concerts that you were present for?
I would, yes.
Over the summer of 2015, did you continue to have sexual contact with the defendant?
I did, yes.
Where did you have sexual contact with him? In what different locations?
We would be intimate on the sprinter at the big house, the guest house, and hotels, wherever he wanted to.
And when you said sprinter, what are you referring to?
The sprinter van.
And when did the defendant, when were you at the defendant? When were you and the defendant on the sprinter van together?
Every day, it was our form of transportation.
And you also mentioned the big house and the guest house. Were those the two locations in Atlanta?
Yes.
How about when you were in Chicago? Where, if any, would you have sexual contact with the defendant in Chicago?
At hotels and at the studio.
The studio that you previously identified on Ohio Street?
Yes.
How often would you have sexual contact with the defendant during that summer of 2015?
We had sex almost every day.
Mm. And during the course of your time with the defendant, what, if anything, did you ever notice that the defendant was doing while you were engaged in sexual contact with him?
He would basically control exactly every single time we were intimate,
And what do you mean by he will control it?
meaning that he would say everything specifically and I would have to follow exactly what he said.
Can you give me an example of that?
An example would be if he told me to walk or crawl back and forth, and that is what I would have to do until he gave the next notion.
When, if ever, did the defendant make recordings of you?
Almost immediately after meeting him.
You skipped over something.
Objection.
Oh, sorry.
Overruled.
Almost immediately after meeting him.
And by making recordings of you, what was he recording you doing?
He would record us intimately.
And by intimately, what are you referring to?
Every time we had sex, he would record it.
What did he use to record that?
He used the iPads that he had.
And where did the defendant, did you see where the defendant kept these iPads?
He would keep them in the backpack.
How do you know? How did you learn that the defendant was making recordings of you?
When we would be intimate, he would just remove an iPad from his backpack and he would prop it on something, and the camera would be facing us so that he could see everything. That is usually how every sexual encounter went with him.
And were you able to see at times what was being recorded?
Every time I could see what was being recorded.
And by the way, you mentioned that the defendant used iPads to record you. Were those Apple iPads?
Yes, they are.
And do you recall the first time that you noticed that the defendant was recording you engaged in sexual contact with him?
Yes.
When do you recall that happening?
It
Hey,
was when I
excuse
was
me.
17 years old.
Excuse
Sorry.
me, ladies. The noise is again is getting really bad. Can y'all try to adjust again, please?
And what specifically do you recall the defendant recording? What were you doing that the defendant recorded?
I don't know what's going on with the sound whenever you two talk.
Did you hear static in now?
Yeah, I do.
Let me go out and come back in.
Okay.
Uh,
What line are we? I'm sorry.
Same line that y'all
It
left off.
took me out.
You sound good now.
Okay. I recall that he had made me crawl back and forth. Then he had begun to give me oral head. And
One
then
second.
after, okay, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Go ahead now.
Oh, that was line 20, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I recall that he had made me crawl back and forth. And then he had begun to give me oral head. And then after that, we had vaginal penetration.
and when you say oral head, what specifically do you mean?
I had gave him oral sex.
And was that with your mouth or his penis?
Yes, it was.
And did you say that was one of the things that you saw the defendant recording
Yes, it was.
with this Apple iPad?
Yes, it was.
How old were you when the defendant recorded that?
I was 17 years old.
And you also said that the defendant recorded you having sexual intercourse with the defendant. Is that right?
Yes.
With the Apple iPad?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was 17 years old.
When you had sexual contact with the defendant, did he ejaculate?
Yes, he would.
Where would he ejaculate?
He would ejaculate on my face, on my chest, on my butt, and eventually he began ejaculating inside of me at 17. Mm,
Mm.
okay.
She stressed that part, did
Mm,
Okay.
mhm.
When he ejaculated on your face, what would you do?
I would usually wash it off. However, there were times where he would make me leave it on my face.
What, if anything, do you remember about a time when he had you leave, not allow you, or you didn't wash your face immediately?
There was
Objection.
Overruled.
There was a time where he did ejaculate on my face, and he told me not to wash it off and to let it harden. And I do recall him having his wardrobe stylist come in and have an entire conversation with her while I had his hardened semen on my face. And I recall them laughing, and I felt very much humiliated. And I got up and I went to the washroom and I washed it off my face.
Do you know his stylist's name?
Cash Howard.
I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government Exhibit 68. I'm sorry, 86. Do you recognize 86?
Yes, I do.
Who is that?
That is the wardrobe stylist.
Is that Cash Howard?
Yes, it is.
The government offers 86.
No objection.
It's in evidence. You can publish it.
Now, you testified earlier about times where the defendant recorded you engaged in sexual contact. Where would these recordings take place?
They would take place anywhere that he wanted to have sex. So if we were in the Sprinter, if we were in a hotel, if we were in Atlanta or Chicago in the studio, wherever we were,
And did the defendant record you engaged in sexual contact using his iPad in Chicago
yes, he did.
while you were 17?
Yes, he did.
And how about in Atlanta
Yes, he did.
while you were 17?
Yes, he did.
Did you ever see what was on the recordings that the defendant made?
I had only seen what he would show me or what he would when he would prop the camera up when I could see us.
What, if anything, do you recall about when the defendant would show you recordings that had been made of you?
He would only allow me to see about 5 to 10 seconds if he was playing it back, and it was of me and him, and he would boast or compliment how good we looked.
Do you recall how old you were when the recordings were made that the defendant showed you and boasted about?
Yes, I was 17 years old.
During the summer of 2015, did there come a time when you traveled to Connecticut?
Yes, there was.
Why did you go to Connecticut?
I believe he had a couple of shows that he had missed and had to make up for.
Where were the shows? What type of venue?
I believe they were casinos, areas, and stadiums and festivals.
Okay.
Yes, arenas.
And I'm sorry, you said a casino? What do you mean by that?
Well, like previously, the show in Las Vegas that was at the casino.
Okay. Do you recall a specific venue for the show in Connecticut that you went to in the summer of 2015?
I do not.
Okay. And do you recall whether or not you had sexual contact with the defendant when you traveled with him to Connecticut in the summer of 2015?
We were intimate.
By intimate, what do you mean?
We had vaginal penetration.
Did you ever contract a sexually transmitted disease?
I did.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 17.
What, if any, symptoms did you first notice?
Every single time we would have vaginal penetration, I would have discomfort in my pelvis and in my lower abdomen, and I expressed it to him.
To the defendant?
Yes, I did.
How did he respond?
Initially, he would joke and say that it was just because he was too big size wise. And then he would try and comfort me and he would give me warm washcloths to place on my stomach and he would try to massage my stomach.
Did your symptoms subside?
They did not.
What did you do?
They got worse actually, and I got to the point where I couldn't physically even walk.
What did you do?
I had to make a doctor's appointment, which he had juice book.
You mentioned Juice. Are you referring to the woman you met in Las Vegas?
Yes.
And when you said he had Juice book, who are you referring to? The he in that sentence.
The defendant.
Did you then meet with that doctor?
I did, yes.
What, if anything, did the doctor diagnose you with?
She said that I had contracted an STD herpes,
Did she tell you what type of herpes you had?
vaginal herpes.
What, if any, medications did she prescribe for you?
She had given me a few prescriptions. Actually, I had told her that I wanted the most expensive one to alleviate the pain as quick as possible.
Did you get those prescriptions filled?
Yes, Juice was with me.
Where did you go?
We went to Walgreens
In downtown? Where?
in downtown Chicago.
And I'm sorry, where was the doctor located?
Downtown Chicago.
How did you feel once you learned that you had contracted herpes?
I was devastated.
What, if any, conversation did you have with the defendant after you learned that you had contracted herpes?
I had told him, and he was agitated and said that I could have gotten that from anyone.
What did you say?
I told him that I had only been intimate with him.
What, if anything, did the defendant then say about whether he had previously been diagnosed with an STD or a sexually transmitted disease?
He never did. Shit,
Can it?
I'm sorry. Can it?
I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
He never did.
Thank you.
You said you felt devastated. Can you explain why you felt that way?
I felt that this man had purposely given me something that he knew he had, a situation that he could have controlled.
Did the medication make your symptoms subside?
It did.
After you initially received medication, what, if any, further symptoms of the STD did you feel?
In the future, anytime I had an outbreak, I would only get prescriptions from him and his doctor.
Did you, in fact, have additional outbreaks?
I did, yes, very seldom.
You said that you would get prescriptions from him. Who are you referring to?
The defendant.
Do you recall what you were given?
They were blue, the same blue pills that the female doctor had initially given me.
Do you remember what, if anything, the defendant said when you had outbreaks after you were initially diagnosed?
We just wouldn't be intimate. Oh, sorry. Anytime I ask him, oh, where am I? I'm sorry, you guys.
12.
I went off.
12.
Sorry. Okay. At any time that I ask him, he would usually make it like a joke, like, oh, I take one, you take one, just take one. Everyone has it. Like, it's no big deal.
What, if anything, would he say about parts of your body when you had an outbreak?
We just wouldn't be intimate.
You said that you seldomly had outbreaks.
Yes.
In the beginning, how regular, how often did you have outbreaks?
In the beginning, the very first outbreak that I ever had was intense. And every single time we tried to be intimate after that,
Objection. Not responsive.
Overruled.
every time we tried to be intimate after that, I would continuously get an outbreak from him. And he expressed to me, he said, I think your pussy is broken.
And after that, did you continue to have outbreaks as well?
I had to give it time to be able to be intimate with him. But after about a month, everything had gone away. Jesus
And
Christ.
did you have outbreaks though after that initial time?
Yes, I did.
You testified earlier about a few rules that the defendant told you during that first trip to California. Do you remember that testimony?
Yes, I do.
Once you had spent a couple of months with the defendant, did you become aware of additional rules set by the defendant?
Yes, I did.
How did you become aware of those rules?
He had expressed them to me, and other people around him had expressed them to me.
Like who?
His assistants, people like Juice.
What were some of the rules that you learned about?
My wardrobe, I basically was in sweats or oversized clothing. I couldn't leave my hotel room without getting in touch with him or asking an assistant And
How, if at all, did the defendant want you to respond when you entered the room?
he wanted me to call him daddy and immediately give him a kiss.
What, if anything, did the defendant tell you about your communication with your friends once you were spending time with the defendant?
He he was not a big fan of it, and he didn't necessarily want me talking to him about him or us.
Back when you were 17 years old and spending time with the defendant, did you have social media back then?
I did.
What types of social media did you have when you were 17 years old?
I had social media on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter.
What is Snapchat?
Snapchat is a picture and chat app where you can accept your friends and family. You can send them pictures and text messages that deletes after it's open forever.
And do you remember, without saying it, do you remember your username for your Snapchat account?
Yes, I do.
I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 949. Do you recognize government exhibit 949?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
It is my Snapchat handle.
And can we publish this to only the jury, please? Actually, I'm sorry. The government offers 949.
No objection.
Okay. That's published only to the jury.
Yes, please. What, if anything, did the defendant tell you about your use of social media at the age of 17?
How once I had moved to Chicago, he had told me to delete all my social media.
What, if any, explanation did he provide to you?
He just said that he didn't want me having social media.
I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 325. Do you recognize what's shown in government exhibit 325?
Yes, I do.
Generally speaking, what is that?
This is basically something that I had been writing since I was 17 years old, and it basically expresses how I need to act, think, and be when around the defendant.
And what made you think that you had to act, think, and be around the defendant in the way that is reflected in 325?
Well, these are all the things that he would say
The government offers exhibit.
Can you both repeat what you just said because y'all went out? You went out.
Yeah, I heard something about it.
The government offers 325.
I mean, I could start and say no objection, but I didn't hear what they said to get up to that.
Can y'all go back to line one, I guess?
Generally speaking, what is that?
This
Line
is
two.
basically something that I have been writing since I was 17 years old, and it basically expresses how I need to act, think, and be when around the defendant.
And what made you think that you had to act, think, and be around a defendant in a way that is reflected in 325?
Well, these are all the things that he would say to me, and I would write them down to remember.
The government offers exhibit 325.
No objection.
All right. That's in evidence.
May we publish?
Yes.
Can you read what's shown in 325 that you wrote that you were just referring to?
Yes. It says, do not be goofy, extra, or act young when told something in private or around others. Do not play games when on the phone with daddy. Just say I love you before I hang up. Continue to do what I've always do around other women, I am alone with daddy. Example, bless you, dad. If he belches, trust daddy and do whatever he says. Whatever he says with no rebuttal, disrespect, or rebellion. Remember how I acted in the beginning, bubbly and like a child, pure with no negative intentions. And remember to stay true to who I am, humble, happy, innocent, and beautiful to daddy, reminding him of his mother and child. Tell daddy everything so he will not have to wonder and figure out what is going on with me.
When it says daddy in his note, who are you referring to?
The defendant.
I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 331. Do you recognize what's shown in 331?
I do, yes.
What is that?
This is one of my notes that I would write about the defendant who, would tell me so that I could remember these things.
The government offers 331.
No objection.
That's in evidence.
May we publish?
Yes.
Can you read what's shown in 331?
It says, remember to say, I will not lie or mess up at all today. Find a positive quote to say to daddy every day. If I lie, own up, say I'm sorry, and take it back right away. Do not contemplate, be strong, and be honest. Do not be angry, prideful, selfish, or rebellious. Say
Number one,
yes. Say one thing I am thankful for every day to get rid of negative thinking. Tell daddy one thing that I appreciate about him and continue to lift him up. Stop defending myself. Anything daddy says is to help me. Thank him and be happy and fix the problem. Write every day, even if it's a simple sentence or just to write a thought down.
now you testified earlier that when you met the defendant, you told him that you were 18 when you were, in fact, 17.
Yes,
Did there come a time when you told the defendant your true age?
yes, there did come a time.
How old were you when you told the defendant your true age?
I was still 17.
What, if anything, prompted you to tell him?
Summer ended and I had to go back to school for my senior year in high school.
In what city were you when you told the defendant?
I was in Chicago.
Do you remember where in Chicago you were? Where in Chicago you were when you told the defendant the true age?
Yes, we were in Lincoln Park.
Who was there?
The defendant and Juice were present, and of course, the driver.
You said you were in Lincoln Park?
Yes,
Line 9. Is that in downtown Chicago?
it is, yes.
What happened?
I remember he had his old school car at the time, and we had got Al's beef, and we sat at and ate hot dogs in the park. And I had to let him know that I was 17, and I was very scared. And when I told him, he slapped me in my face with an open palm, and then he walked away.
And at that time, what, if anything, did you have with you?
I believe I just had my phone.
What did you do?
I then walked away because he had walked away and he had never hit me ever before.
And what happened?
He then came back to the park to try and find me for a few hours, and I would see the sprinters circling, and I was trying to avoid him. However, it was getting really late, and I was still in a city that was not my own.
Did you eventually meet up with the defendant?
I did. He eventually saw me, called me to come with him and get back in the Sprinter, and so I did.
Who, if anyone, was in the Sprinter when you got back on?
Juice was on the Sprinter.
And what happened when you got back on the Sprinter?
He gave me a kiss and he said that he would figure this out. And him and Juice laughed and he expressed he had made a comment saying that he thought I was going to tell him something 10 times worse.
What did you do then?
He said that I hadn't needed to get on a flight immediately back to Florida and that he would speak with his attorneys to figure out everything.
Did you, in fact, return to Florida?
I did immediately on the next flight.
How long did you stay in Florida?
Not long, probably about a week.
And what did you do when you were in Florida?
He had told me exactly what to do and exactly what his attorneys had said, which was that I would need to be homeschooled and living with him in Chicago.
And what, if anything, did you do after he told you that?
Both he and I convinced my parents to allow me to be homeschooled and be in Chicago so that I could learn more musically.
And when you say both he and I convinced your parents, what, if any, conversation did the defendant have with your family?
He had told me that, oh,
Objection.
Was it in your presence?
pardon me,
Were you there when he told them whatever it is he told them?
at a later date, yes, I was.
Okay. You can only talk about conversations that you actually heard him say things. All right?
Okay,
So the objection to that is sustained.
okay.
Were you able to convince, were your parents convinced that you could move to Chicago?
Objection.
Yes, they were.
Overruled.
Sorry.
That's all right. Overruled.
What, if anything, did you do to prepare for moving to Chicago?
I had packed a few suitcases, and my mom had given the defendant a long list of things that I would need for school, and they took the steps to get me enrolled into homeschooling.
And do you recall the name of the school where you were homeschooled?
It was still for my county, which was Orange County. It was Florida Virtual Online.
And you're using the term homeschool.
Yes,
But how would you communicate with your teachers during homeschooling?
via a laptop that the defendant had to purchase.
Were you in the presence of any of your teachers?
Not physically, no, but virtually, yes.
What, if anything, did actually, I'm going to show the witness only what's been marked for identification as government exhibit 475A. Do you recognize what's shown in 475?
Yes, I do.
475A, I'm sorry. What is shown in 475A?
This is the letter that he had told me that his attorneys had needed.
Objection.
Overruled.
And it's basically saying that I would be
Don't read it into evidence.
sorry.
That's all right.
It's just a letter from my mother giving consent
For you to do what?
for me to be in Chicago under a woman that he had known.
And you use he a couple of times in that sentence. Who is the he that you're referring to?
The defendant.
And what was the date that this letter was prepared?
September 19, 2015.
How old were you then?
I was still 17.
The government offers 475A.
Any objection?
No objection. No.
All right. That's in evidence.
And I'd like to publish only to the jury and without reading the names, either yours or anyone else's. Can you please read what is shown in 475A?
It says, we, the parents of me, give consent for me to stay with,
Another person?
yes, until 12/30/2015, December 30th, 2015. At that time, she will be under her care.
And who, if anyone, signed that letter?
My mother.
And what happened on December 30th, 2015?
I was then. It is my birthday.
How old were you turning that day?
18.
I'm now showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as I'm showing the witness only what's been marked for identification as Government Exhibit 476A. Do you recognize what's shown in Government Exhibit 476A?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
This is a proper formal letter of what the previous letter was.
The one that you just read in 475A?
Yes.
And were you present for any of this letter when it was made?
Yes, I was. It had to be notarized.
And where was it notarized?
The Orange County clerk.
In Florida?
Yes.
And were you present for that?
Yes, I was.
The government offers 476A.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, that's in evidence.
And may I just publish it to the jury briefly?
Yes.
Now, in both 475A and 476A, there's an individual listed as who would be caring for you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know that individual's daughter?
Yes, I do.
Who is that individual's daughter?
Juice.
The one that the defendant introduced you to in Las Vegas?
Yes.
What, if anything, did you do with the documents shown in 475A and 476A?
The defendant needed them for his attorneys.
How did you know that?
He had expressed to me that he needed it.
So what did you do?
I had giving them to him when I had returned back to Chicago.
So did you, in fact, then return to Chicago?
I did, yes.
And how did you get back to Chicago?
His assistant had booked my travel.
And who paid for that?
The defendant.
Now, when you returned, do you remember, by the way, approximately when you went back to Chicago?
I do not.
You testified earlier that you told the defendant that you were in fact 17 because you had to get back for your senior year. Is that right?
Yes.
And when did your senior year begin?
I don't remember the exact month that it happened in because I had been already late because I stayed in Chicago. However, I did attend school for a week before I was pulled out of school.
Okay, do you know just approximately then what season the school start?
Fall.
Okay. And do you remember what season it was when you returned to Chicago?
Possibly September.
Okay, of 2015?
Yes.
And how old were you then?
Still 17.
Did you stay in Chicago when you returned to Chicago?
We did go to Chicago and also Atlanta.
And did you go on tour with the defendant?
I did, yes.
Do you remember the name of that tour?
It was his, I believe, buffet tour.
And when you say that you went on tour with the defendant, what does that mean? Or what do you mean by that?
By this time, because I was living with the defendant, he had expressed to me that he wanted me to be closer to him, and we had traveled via tour bus.
And so previously you testified that you would fly from city to city to see the defendant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Was this a change now that you would travel by a tour bus from city to city?
Yes.
What would you do when you arrived at a particular stop on the tour?
Do you mean like a pit stop or
A stop for a show. Would you attend the show?
sometimes I would, sometimes I would not know.
And what would you do if you weren't attending a show?
I would stay on the tour bus or I would see him before or after his show backstage.
And by him, who are you referring to?
The defendant.
You mentioned that you were on a tour bus. Who, if anyone else, was on a tour bus with you?
For the most part, it was me and him. However, sometimes Juice would be on the tour bus.
And who drove the tour bus?
His driver of the tour bus at the time.
Did you learn his driver's name?
Yes,
How did you learn the driver's name?
from the defendant.
Were you introduced to the driver?
I was not, no.
What was the driver's name that the defendant, how did the defendant refer to the driver?
Objection.
13.
Oh.
Jane, number 13. As Top Gun. I'm showing the witness only what's marked for identification is Government Exhibit 17. Do you recognize what's shown in 17?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
That is his tour bus driver.
Top Gun?
Yes, it is.
The government offers Exhibit 17.
No objection.
That's in evidence. You can publish.
Thank you. Now, was there a bathroom on the tour bus?
Yes, there were two.
Could you use them?
Yes, I could.
What, if anything, would you do after you use the toilet on the tour bus?
I would have to knock before I could leave the washroom.
And by knock, what do you mean?
I would have to knock on the door until he would say, "Come on," before I could leave the restroom.
So you were inside the bathroom when you were knocking?
Yes,
When you said he, who are you referring to?
the defendant. Pretty, are you there?
What, if any, sexual contact do you have with the defendant while you were traveling on that tour bus on the tour when you were 17 years old?
We would have oral sex and vaginal penetration.
Were those encounters ever recorded?
Yes, they were.
Who recorded them?
The defendant.
With what?
His iPads.
Miss Gaddis, it's almost 1 o'clock. This would be a good time to stop.
Yes, Judge.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break for lunch. Please don't talk about the case at all. But we'll be back here at 2:15 and enjoy your lunches.
Okay, guys, this is a good spot to stop.
You want to finish the page?
No, we can stop right here because this is when the court will come in and says, "Lady, all rise."
So we're on 873, line 11.
Yes.
Write that down. 873, line 11. Let me write that down. 873, line 11.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Tomorrow we're gonna check all our technical difficulty because we're trying to figure out what's going on with the connection. She keep getting kicked out, y'all. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my panel, for reading this. Guys, give them a hand. Give them a hand. I want to see those hands over there, those clapping hands for them. Guys, you rock. And same time tomorrow. Let's try to do it at 8:15 if possible, because I think we have our Jane Doe last day for tomorrow for her. We might have to get another Jane Doe. Perspective could be another Jane
Sounds
Doe.
good.
All right, guys.
I'm sorry,
Have,
y'all.
huh?
Willing vessel, willing vessel.
All right, you guys have a good night.
Good night,
You too.
everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.